What are Christians for?
Yeah, so the title is kind of a riff on Barry's What Are People For
Hmm.
volume. Um, and yeah, I mean the thought was I was writing it before the pandemic started, but then was revising during the pandemic. Um, and just seeing a great deal of loneliness and anxiety and uncertainty kind of everywhere around us. In the church and outside the church, and just was trying to think through like what does it mean to follow a God who calls us to live a life of love, of service, of care, um, in a culture and society that's fragmenting as much as ours is. So that was kind of this like initial kind of thought, and it just built out from there.
You hit a lot of different areas in this book. Just your chapters. I want to read the chapter titles. You do an immense inheritance, a Christian account of nature, the great uprooting, race and the end of nature, the unmaking of places, the fruit of it, industrialism, the unmaking of the body. I mean, it's very diverse, the stuff you're hitting on. Sexual revolution, institutions, Christian social doctrine, Christianity, land, and animals. And I was like, okay, what? When you have the earth as our mother, I went, okay, where are we going, Jake? What is going on here? Then you said a vision of Christian belonging, the household and the sexual revolution, the world in cracked icons, wonder, death, and the end of all things. And then politics beyond accomplishment toward a politics of care. So I went, this is going to be a very interesting book. And it is actually. How you put it together, I think, is pretty good. But you begin by setting up the problem with a series of quotes and insights from global Christianity. You tell a story of the man that you met on the plane. I don't want to give that story away. It's actually a really good story. But you also quote Frederick Douglass, and then you go to the Dutchman Herman Bavinck, and then you talk about the Internet Month, which I haven't seen his name quite some time, Michael Spencer, to shine a light really into the state of American Christianity. And then you state the problem. I'm going to read this just because I think it's so good for our audience to hear. The problem is mostly not with ordinary Christian people half heartedly following Jesus and willfully choosing to ignore certain commandments. The American church is filled with ordinary people who love Jesus and seek to serve him and their neighbors in their daily lives. I have benefited from their kindness and generosity on many occasions. The problem is much more complex than that. It's the way our vision of the Christian life has too often been implicitly conditioned and defined to leave the characteristic idols of the Western world untouched, unscathed, and unchallenged. This is how Christian people, often without even realizing it, are denied access to the life giving power of Christian piety and discipleship by the very institution that ought to introduce them to it, the church. I could not agree more with your statement. I'm going to steal it and use it in my own book and give you no credit. Um,
Your publisher might have something to say.
I think, though, we often talk on this show of the idolatry, the cultural idolatry involved in our church that we don't realize because they don't fit within the traditional categories of the acts of the sinful nature. They're much more good things that become those God things and then they become those bad things.